I think it's really important to understand how the viewer eye goes through the entire composition, where it gets stuck, where it lands, and where it comes back to. Those are really important elements to me. So as you're viewing the image that you submitted, kind of follow along with me, but also look at other people's images and see how it's going in terms of the way your eye goes through that composition. I guarantee you I'm a stickler for tangents, and we're going to find a bunch of them. There's going to be some exposure issues and some things where the eye just kind of gets caught, and I want to really draw that to your attention. So before we get going, I just want to give you a quick reminder that you can now join our subscription service. We've got a really great deal going on our annual subscription, which is really only the cost of about 3 tutorials. You have access to everything, as well as some additional subscriber content that you can't get elsewhere. If you want to continue to buy via download, if that's your preferred method, that's fine as well. But please take a look at the subscription offering, because it's really something pretty special, we think. So that being said, we're going to just jump right in here. So I just have these loaded in preview, and I'm going to go up to the top so you can see the name of each person. This is Adrian, and we've got a pretty beautiful image of pasta. I don't even know what kind of pasta this is. For me, the first thing right off the bat is this is very, very abstract and sculptural. It, in many ways, doesn't feel like a typical food shot because it is so abstract. And it's really kind of hard to tell what's going on. There are a couple things going on. Right here, there's this big like triangle section, almost like a monolith. It's kind of in shadow. I'd love to see a little bit more light in there and a little bit more detail. I think overall the light is really beautiful, particularly in this other image, or this other piece of pasta, where you really see the undulations and you get an understanding of that jagged edge. And I like the little bit of flour that's kind of scattering down. That helps fill the negative space pretty well. My eye is getting caught though in this little left corner. If you can see down here, I don't know what's going on there, and it kind of feels like a mistake. And I say that because everything else is just these two big pieces of pasta, but right here there's something going on. I can't tell what it is. There's almost a highlight in it that feels like glass, but it's not. Clearly it's some sort of additional piece of pasta, but it's so far in the distance and it's so minimal. I just kind of want to see that gone and just really concentrate on the actual pasta itself. Overall, I'm going to say this is a pretty successful image. Again, I feel like it's so macro and so sculptural that it's not your typical food shot. But that's cool. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Quality light is really beautiful. Again, I'd bring some light into this area that is just so far in shadow that it's really getting dark and losing all tone. I'd love to see a little bit of tone in there. The other place where it's losing tone is actually in this highlight right here. It's pretty hot and it's going white. That's a case where a polarizer could come in handy just to give you a little bit of tone and a little bit of color back in that highlight, but not eliminate the highlight. I think having the correct color in a highlight is also really an important quality. So that's something I would look out for. But overall, nice shot. Okay, this one is Adriano. So this image is interesting. There's a lot of stuff here that's really working, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm struggling with. So first and foremost, there's kind of an absence of light here because there's an absence of shadow. There's a little bit of shadow down in this cut between these two pieces of meat, but for the most part, I'm not seeing shadows coming off of either edge. There's something going on with this plate, and I know there were a couple of comments about those tomatoes that they didn't feel real. I know that they are. I don't know if there's been any sharpening done to them. They just feel a little bit intense. That might be something that just wants to be softened a little bit with focus. There's great tone in the salt. You can really understand that those are salt grains. They're not blowing out, which is really critical. But again, there's no real shadow. And some of that, I think, is because this is on this deep, deep charcoaled background, this surface, where there's just almost no way for light to be there because it just gets sucked up. But I'd love to see a little shadow coming off of this. And clearly this is done for a particular product where they're really highlighting that product. But again, that box, because it's laying down and there's no shadow really coming off of it, it kind of looks like there's a little bit of shadow here, but not enough to make me feel like there's really dimension. Like I don't see this as having depth or dimension at all. It almost looks like it could be a piece of paper. And then the other area that's a little strange is the fork and knife. So the knife has one tone going across it, where clearly there was a piece of diffusion held on top, and you get all of that knife to kind of come out. There's really not even a gradient on it. The fork, however, in contrast, you just see the base of it, and then it dips down into darkness, and you see none of the tines, so they kind of disappear. So to me, there's a little bit of a disparity there. I'd love to see a little bit of black coming into the knife. That can be tricky, and I know that. I've shot enough silverware where having black in it can really look terrible. But there is a place where you can find a good balance, and you can kind of have that, that shape of it come out a little bit more. Overall, I think that's one of the things that's missing here, is some of the shape. Again, because it needs shadow. I think the meat is really well cooked, and it's highlighted well, which is good. It could use a little bit of brushing, maybe a little bit of glycerin just on the top. Because again, food like this it's gonna be pretty succulent, right? It's gonna be juicy, it's gonna have a lot of fluid to it. So there, I think that's a great instance where some spectral highlights really can help you out to have a little bit of gleam, to have a little bit of pop. And the other thing is this edge is just getting lost here against the board. It's really close, right? The edge of this meat is really close to the edge of the board. I feel like just a little bit of a fill card kind of dropped in there on a separate capture would help that to come out a bit, and you'd be able to see that edge a little bit. Overall, it's a pretty nice image. There's some good stuff going on. Again, I would caution about having more shadow because it needs more form. That is especially true when you're doing an overhead. Downshots of food can be tough because everything flattens out. And there are really a couple different ways we approach food as food photographers. There's either the kind of low kind of hero shot where you really get to see things kind of coming up and make them taller than they actually are. There's a kind of a 3/4, and then the down version. Down versions are done a lot, but that's where you have to pay incredible attention to your background and to your light to make sure that things still have dimension. All that being said, this may have worked on a lighter background, a little bit lighter background better because you'd have some of that pop. Right now it's so dark that things are kind of bleeding into it. All right, this is Amy. All right, overall, Amy, I think this is a really pretty shot. There's a lot going on here. I think these are called pirouettes. I want to say profiteroles, but I think that they're called pirouettes. I think that there might actually be a few too many, because right over here for me is the real beauty, particularly in the little bit of melted ice cream on the spoon, the ice cream melting onto the board. That's all really gorgeous. My eye is going here because this is a lot lighter and it's more active, so I keep winding up here. So maybe just having a little bit fewer of these would have been a better approach. Overall, a gorgeous shot, great sense of light, light kind of raking through. Again, we're doing an overhead shot here, but you see more of the dimension because there's a lot more shadow. There are two areas I'm also going to caution, and that's in the corners. So right up here in this top corner, you see how there's just this little kind of chunk of dark. I'd almost want to just take that corner and stretch it out so that kind of disappears, because it feels a little odd to have that little missing kind of nugget. That is so far from a hill to die on, it's not even funny. The other one is in this other corner where all of a sudden we have a bit of much warmer light and my eye is getting pulled to that corner and it's kind of dying right here on that woodcut, just because there's enough light there that it pulls my eye. Corners like this I like to have a little bit darker. Now, of course, this upper corner is darker and I'm kind of dinging that, but the corners are nice when they're kind of burned in just a little because it pushes the eye back in. So again, I want to make sure that my eye is always traveling around and going to the hero part. The hero part in this case is this bowl of ice cream and this spoon. Again, with all the lines on the pirouettes, my eye is getting caught in here, and it almost is dividing the image in half. I want to keep pushing my eye to this left. Like the vanilla is doing that. The way the vanilla is positioned, it's pushing my eye back around here. I'm going into the spoon and then back up into the ice cream bowl. That's perfect. That's what I want to see. These guys, however, are kind of coming to a point and almost dying where all this stuff is collecting here and my eye is sometimes getting caught there. So overall, I think that's a really, really pretty image. Not much I can really complain about that, but just a few pointers for Amy. Nice shot. Okay, Andre. So Andre, I do want to say that I did see some comments about this image, and I know that you had a comment about having trouble with the liquid actually pouring out, and I have a really good tip for that. You absolutely did this the right way in having the can open on the backside where you were pouring additional liquid through. And I know it was kind of problematic for you because it wasn't flowing out really fast and it was just kind of winding up with this trickle that you didn't like. And you felt there was way too much carbonation in it. There was. So whenever I'm doing a beer pour like this, The beer that I'm pouring, I actually flatten. I'll take a bunch of beer, I'll put it in a huge bowl, and I'll take a whisk, and I will beat it and just kind of get all the carbonation out as much as I can. Sometimes I'll even actually let that sit overnight so that I can pour it the next day, because I want that carbonation to dissipate. The reason why I want that carbonation to dissipate is because you'll get a much better flow. It'll come out faster. It's not gonna, literally, it's not gonna clog up from the air bubbles. And that's what happens. The air bubbles slow it all down. They're having trouble getting through the opening. The other thing that you can do is actually make the opening a little bit larger. So it looks like there's still that tab in there. You can push that back even further so that you can get more liquid to flow out. So in this case, what I would do is actually have probably 2/3 of the liquid in the glass, actually full strength carbonation. It would be the real thing, so it would be kind of filled up to here. And then I would start to pour the flat beer, and you would get a better pour where it's kind of coming and cresting more towards this edge. Because there's gonna be carbonation down below, you're still gonna get a ton of bubbles. You're gonna get a lot of what's going on in there now, but it's gonna be a little bit more controllable, and you're not gonna be able to tell that the beer that's pouring is flat. You really won't see that, but you'll get a much better flow. So that's a really good quick tip for that. Overall, this composition is beautiful. There are a couple of things that I'm gonna recommend in terms of lighting. I think that this highlight is a little bit too wide. I would actually kind of feather it off and narrow it down, which you actually can do in post-production on this. There's also a spot right here, and this is really natural. When you get these kind of curvatures, these hip joints on glassware, you'll get an area where the exposure kind of dips. I would work in post just to bring that up a little bit so it's a little bit more consistent, or has a better gradient on it. But other than that, I would thin this out because it's a little wide and my eye tends to go to that. I'm also gonna pick up on this highlight here. I like this highlight a lot. I just wanna see it carry a little bit more. It's gonna give really nice contrast to what's going on here in this kind of shadowy area. But if we have a little bit more contrast up there in terms of having a highlight, I think that would be really nice. The other thing I would do is maybe add a little bit more spritz or slush. There's a little drop underneath, but only one. There's just a tiny, tiny drop there. The rest of it's really kind of fine. I think it'd be nice to have a little bit more of the larger stuff up here. And some of that might be playing with light too to get it to show up, because clearly it's kind of wrapping underneath there and it's harder to see. But overall, that's a beautiful image. Okay, this is also Andre. Not sure if it's the same Andre or not. This image, really solid. I think this is very successful for several reasons. Number one, you've got a hero cocktail. It is very clear that this guy is the hero and the eye pulls here. You also have what beverage companies love the most, and that's sociability. Beverage companies never want to have anybody drinking alone. That's a social faux pas, so having a couple other glasses helps support that idea of sociability, people being together, that kind of community, that camaraderie, that enjoying a story over a cocktail. That's really important. So from that point, it's really successful. The tones in this are really nice. I actually like the surface, a little bit of ice chunks here that are kind of melting. The only thing I see is these guys feel like these two garnishes feel like they're in such a line. I want to break them up a little bit. I want to kind of knock one of them off a little bit so they're not so much in a line. But that's not a big deal, quite honestly. The other thing I don't understand what's going on is there's this little bit of color wash that's happening down here. And I don't know if that was a berry that stained the surface or if it's something reflecting a little bit in, but my eye is pulling it there, and I would just kind of clean that in post-production because it just doesn't need to be there. Same here, there's a little red dot. Almost looks like a stem to something. I think it's one of these curls of rhubarb, and I guess it's a little bit of that edge. Really hard to see what's going on, and it kind of feels like a mistake. So that part I would clean out. But other than that, it's a pretty nice shot. Might want to push the shadows a little bit, make them a little bit deeper, particularly on the front glass. You can see how much deeper this is, and that's, to me, that's better contrast. I like that. I think these shadows could be deepened up just a little bit, kind of the way the shadow is also coming off of this garnish here. But overall, really, really beautiful shot. There's good light coming through the glass too, which is important. There's good tone, but you can see that light coming through the ice. Very well done. All right, who is this? Ben. All right, Ben, this is a pretty cool image. I like this. I think that this has a really interesting feel. There's something really kind of retro about this, but also really contemporary at the same time, and I love that. Bottle's really well done, heroed. I think that this highlight would serve best if it's coming off of the actual name. I like to see the highlights come off and not interfere, particularly when you have white lettering. That white highlight going on top of white lettering tends to be a little bit distracting, and I would actually kind of pull that off. So if it hit just over here, it would be a little bit nicer. Good natural quality of light though. Like this bottle really feels like it was here. It wasn't fussed with too much, and I like that sense. Feels like that label is just a little to the right. So another capture needed to be done where it was rotated to the left a little just to make that center. Because something like this, the client's really gonna want this heroed out and they're gonna pay attention to stuff. You could do that digitally, but I tend to just grab another capture where I rotate it. One thing I do too, I don't know if you guys have seen any of my Beverage tutorials, but when I'm working with this stuff, I will actually, on my screen, I'll take a Post-it and I will stick it from the edge of the bottle and I'll come over to the label and I'll make a fold, and then I'll go to the other side and I'll make sure that that fold is the same distance from the label to the edge of the bottle. Sometimes it's so hard to tell, but if you can do something like that, then you're able to just rotate the bottle ever so slightly and get those folds perfect. You can keep refolding the piece of Post-it, the little piece of paper. It's just a simple trick. You can put grids on it, but the grids don't always line up exactly. I just find that honestly a manual piece of paper is the easiest thing to do. There's a little bit of weird highlighting going on in coloration. There's a little bit of red that's kind of washing in here, and I see it in this jar as well. I think I'd love to have those kind of neutralized or cleaned out because they don't help. They're actually distracting because I don't see anything that would be causing them. So to me, it kind of pulls my eye. The only other, excuse me. The only other thing I feel is that there's a lot going on right here with the foliage kind of behind the bottle, but there's a lot of open space. This is probably the condition of the plant, but it might have been good to actually not only do this, but do a couple more captures where you clip some of these and just kind of hold them in there so that you kind of fill this out a little bit more. There's a lot of negative space in here that kind of pulls my eye and I don't feel is needed. This negative space is really well balanced with what's going on with the grapefruit and the small berries down below. So that feels good to me. And I like this garnish too. That's really nice. Overall, I think this is a really beautiful image. If you did nothing but remove the color cast in the red highlight and the highlights over here, I think you have a winner of an image. It's really nice. One more tangent. This little piece of foliage is coming right down and dropping into the corner. That's one of those weird tangents that just kind of makes me, don't love those. I hate it when things terminate like that. I'd rather see it kind of go behind or off to the side so it didn't interfere, because that just creates a weird chunk. Visual chunk. All right, moving on to Brad. All right, overall, this is a pretty clean and nice bottle shot. I like what's going on here. Brad, one thing I would recommend, so you've got a highlight running down the left side of the bottle, right? It's kind of coming all the way down, which is good because it's helped giving it definition. The edge that's dark just to the left of that needs to be pushed a little bit darker so that there's more tone to it and it contrasts a little bit. It's kind of graying out right now. And to me, that loses appetite appeal. So I would actually push that edge a little bit darker. Again, we're getting a weird color here, a red highlight that's kind of coming up that doesn't seem to really fit. So I would eliminate that highlight completely. The other thing I will tell you, and I'm kind of a stickler for this, so the main highlight's coming from the left, but the actual strong part of the light on the label is kind of coming from the upper right. And to me, that's backwards. I have always lit my bottles so that the highlight goes from left to right, the way we read. So I would actually rather have that highlight stronger here, where it starts on eruption, versus ending on the end of the name. Like right now, to me, that highlight is a little bit backwards. I would rather have that highlight here, kind of matching the highlight coming off of the edge, and then wrapping around and getting a little bit darker. And one of the reasons that would also be nice is because if you look up above, you've got the lighter section of the bottle here. If that label is a little bit darker, it's gonna give it more volume, it's gonna give it more shape, and it's gonna give it more pop. In that sense, it's actually like classic portraiture, right? So if you look at classic portraiture going back in history, they would have a highlight on one side and the other side would kind of go into shadow. In the background, they would do the opposite. The highlight would be over here and the shadow would be behind the highlight side on the face. That gave it so much more depth. It's just simple, left, right, repeat, right? Or left, right, left. It's a very simple repeat, and that works really well here. So again, if this label was brighter here, the darker part up above with the bottle and the liquid is really gonna contrast nicely, and it's gonna give it more shape. Then it's gonna round around, and you're gonna have the highlight here with a little bit darker side on that part of the label. It'd be really nice. Overall, this is a nice shot. This is something that's very presentable. You could easily show this to a client. I would clean out that red highlight and eliminate that. But then when you go back to shoot, think about what I'm saying in terms of lighting from left to right. I really like the highlights to kind of read the way we actually read. I hope that makes sense. It may sound a little bit weird, but that's always been my kind of MO. All right, Sun Syrup. This is Brandon. All right, this one's really interesting. First and foremost, I'm curious if this was done as spec or if this was actually done as client work. It's really a pretty intense shot. Some really good stuff going on here in the creation of the sun. That's definitely a good amount of post and CGI work possibly. And it's definitely interesting. I like it. And it absolutely ties in with the idea of sun syrup clearly. I like the way it's kind of dripping off. So when we get down to the pancakes, so a couple things I'm seeing on the pancakes. There's some areas where they're really kind of dipping. Like down here, they're starting to flatten out a little bit. And I don't know if you used a food stylist on this or not. I would assume that you did. But I would pay attention to areas like that where it's kind of really undulating. You could actually warp this in post-production, kind of lift this up because it has almost like this dent in it here. And I mention that because that's just where my eye gets stuck, right? These are little areas that are pretty easy to fix. You could easily bend that up, warp it up, and get rid of that little spot because my eye just kind of goes right there. A lot of syrup, man. That would give you a sugar coma if you're eating that thing. But again, you know, excuse me. I don't know if you were doing this directly for a client or on spec, but you're certainly conveying the message of the client, and that is, you know, syrup. This is the real deal. So overall, it's a really nice shot. Light's pretty good. Again, I want to see a little bit more form and shape to it. It feels pretty evenly lit on the front side. It'd be nice just to have a little bit of gradient going around just to give those pancakes a little bit more shape and form. Might also want to kind of tone down the highlight under the plate because my eye's going down there. I don't think you want to eliminate those highlights, but just maybe tone them down a little bit. Maybe have a little bit more shadow coming off of the plate because it feels like it's in so tight right now that plate in some ways doesn't feel grounded. All right, who do we have here? This is Brian. Man, this is beautiful. There's a lot going on in the shot, and I love it. I think the use of color, the use of fire, the use of texture, all complement the bottle really, really well. This is a very, very well done image. All right, so a couple things I'm looking at in going through the bottle. We do have the highlight here coming on the left and kind of rounding out. There's good tone. You can read everything in here. Clearly, there's something printed on the back of the bottle. Man, in this case, I almost want to make that disappear because there's so much going on. I know that would probably be a complete brand faux pas. The brand wouldn't want that because there's something back there, and I'm sure they spent a lot of money developing it. To me, it distracts me with everything else that's going on because there's so much interest visually going on. That being said, I wouldn't want to step on their toes. That's something you'd have to do with the client. There is a dark spot right here, and I can't tell what's going on there. If that's an emblem that is just so far in shadow that there's no tone in it, or if there's something coming through the bottle, that spot, that's the only spot that really bugs me. The neck label is really beautiful. There's great tone there. It's well positioned. Could use a little bit more light in post just to bring this cap up so it comes off. But man, overall, this is beautiful. I love a little bit of sparks and kind of trailers that are coming down here at the end. I love all the flames that are shooting up through the blue that's up here and the smoke. This is a gorgeous image. Yeah, this is really pretty nice. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of a light on the emboss the way we're getting over here. Just a little bit of that, the kind of edges of those flames that are highlighting there. That could have been done in a separate capture just to pop that up. I think the brand would actually appreciate that. But man, overall, that's a hard image to knock because that's really quite pretty. Okay, Brian. Hi, Brian. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm still fighting the summer cold. It's been 2 weeks. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm struggling with this because this does not feel like it was shot together. The perspective of the baklava feels different from the plate. I feel like it was stripped in and it wasn't really shot there. I could be wrong, but that's the sense that I'm getting because the light doesn't quite match and the perspective doesn't quite match. Nor does the focus. It feels like the focus is just a little bit off for what I'm seeing with the plate and the scene. The rest of the scene is actually really pretty nice. I mean, there's some good stuff going on here. I wouldn't mind a little bit of a vignette coming here in this upper corner just to push the eye back in. Coffee is good, but I would actually suggest using a polarizing lens or a scrim to knock down that highlight so the highlight isn't so overwhelming. I think coffee looks better when it's darker and rich. It just has that sense of more of like a fresh brewed cup. When it's getting that highlight, it just kind of becomes distracting and it actually matches too much with the cup itself. So this is a spot where I think it'd be nice to have a little bit of highlight coming around a little bit over here, but more of this being that dark, rich coffee color. The fork is good. There's good tone and good shape in that. Napkin's cool. But I'm honestly not convinced that this was shot together. This feels like it was stripped together in post, and that has me a little concerned. All right, Caleb. All right, so kind of white line, black line type approach to this. Overall, pretty good. This might be a pretty low res image because it's bitmapping a little bit. I'm kind of losing some detail in the label. I think this is a shot that could benefit from having a card more in the background to get more of a glow on it, because I'm seeing a lot of surface highlight where we're getting a lot of this highlight of the actual modifier here and up here, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's pulling my eye, and I honestly want to focus on the label and I want to focus on the liquid. So to me, this feels like it needs to have a car behind it or the surface in the background to be lit so that we're getting a good pool of light kind of coming up here. Again, I think that this image would really benefit from having that kind of classic portraiture approach where you have the highlight coming on the left side, wrapping around. I think this label needs to be a little bit darker on the right side because it's kind of flat. And then having the opposite where you've got a highlight kind of here in the liquid with the liquid being darker over here so you get that real sense of depth. Honest to God, study classic portraiture when you're shooting bottles. There is so much that you will learn in doing bottle work from classic portraiture that will really help kind of up your game. I think that there's a lot that we all benefit from. I actually employ it all the time. All right, Carla. This is a beautiful image. Really, really solid. I like what's going on here a lot. So the splash, everything that's going on in the surface is beautiful. I even love this kind of almost figure eight shape that's going on. These splashes are really cool, and there's great shape around the bottle and a little bit of mystery where this bottle kind of dives into the liquid and it's starting to disappear on us. This is something Jack Daniel's would love because their bottle isn't completely trashed with liquid being all over it. It's keeping the main part of the bottle really clean. It's getting across kind of that message of the actual liquid, which is really important. I'd love to see a little bit more gradient going on here in the actual liquid. It feels really hot right here. I'd actually love to see it get a little bit dark on this side. Again, we're gonna get that kind of classic portraiture feel. There's a little bit of highlight going on here on the surface. I really want to kind of encourage people to play with polarizers on both the lens and the light to make sure that you can control those highlights exactly how you want them. Bottles are really difficult. That's what I love about them. They're incredibly challenging to photograph, and they just make these crazy surface highlights. Surface highlights on bottles have to be met with a lot of care. There's so much about the liquid that is critical to the actual brand. When you think about their spirit, they put so much into the label and the color of that liquid and the shape of the bottle, but you want to highlight all those. And that's a very long way of me saying I tried to minimize the highlights on the actual surface of the glass. I don't want to highlight the glass so much as I want to highlight the liquid. It's about branding, it's about liquid, it's about drinkability. So those are things I really focus on. Overall, this is a really, really nice image. Yeah, I really can't. The green I don't love, but that's part of the product. So that is what it is. And the only thing I would say there is make sure that you're matching what is actually on the bottle, because again, clients are really sticklers for what they have spent all their time and money designing with their labels. So just make sure that those colors represent accurately. But really nice image, Carla. Love it. All right, this image is pretty cool. Who did this? This is Carlos. I love this. Excuse me. I love the concept behind this. This is a really well executed image. Clearly, it's trickery, right? It's a lot of post-production work, but this is really well done. The only thing I want to suggest to Carlos is actually taking this pour and maybe tapering it so it comes out a little bit wider. Clearly, this is nothing that would ever happen in actuality, but I just feel like it's kind of split. It's almost over on the kind of on the side, on the left side, and I kind of want to feel like it's coming out in a more voluminous manner. It never would. This clearly is not something that would ever happen, but that's the only thing I think I would want to do is kind of drag this over, give it a little bit more curve, and make it feel like it's coming out. I love what's going on in here. This is really beautiful. That contrast could be pushed a little bit. I think that the deep blues that are here could be even deeper. Overall, I think the image feels a little bit washed out in that sense. So I would push the contrast. I think it could use it all the way down, even in the edges. The base is probably pretty good. You could push that just a little bit, but I'd love to see some of these blues get a little bit deeper. And the same with the vignette. The background's really nice, but I'd love to see these edges start to push a little bit deeper because it's going to push your eye in. It's going to make this more heroic, and it's just going to be a nicer composition to have these edges kind of vignetted a little bit. Overall, this is fabulous. Love this shot. All right. Charlie Bard. This is a really pretty image. There's some great stuff here, and there's some stuff I'm not sure what's going on, Charlie, so I'm going to call it out. Overall, this is beautiful. I absolutely love what's happening with this bottle. There is this feeling of almost like fire on the inside, even though there's not. There's just this wonderful sense of light. I'd love to see maybe drop down a little bit more under here so that there isn't quite so much black space. But these tones are really beautiful. In this case, in some ways I don't mind the highlight that's on the surface of the glass because it's really got a lot of good contrast in it. There's a lot of good stuff going on and kind of leading my eye down here. This feels just a hair hot compared to what's going on here. And this line, which is a highlight, is actually almost feeling like a scar in the wood because it's such a kind of a straight line. I like the curved highlights that are coming off that mimic the shape of the bottle. That highlight I'm just finding a little bit distracting. This is gorgeous. The emboss is perfect. Clients go crazy for that because again, this is something they spend so much money on. Having these bottles with this glass emboss, that's an expensive proposition for them. That's something they really want to highlight, so doing this is really fabulous. Good tonal quality up here. I feel like this neck label is a little bit hot, particularly when you look down at the body label. I think it's kind of blowing out a little bit. These highlights are a little bit too hot, and there's a lot of heat kind of wrapping around. I think that needs to be toned down and kind of brought more into line with the main body label because you don't want the neck to be the hero. The neck is important. Clients, again, want to bring that label to life, but I wouldn't have it outshine the main body label. This glass topper is really pretty. I love what's going on in here. The only thing is we're losing that top edge, and I feel like there needs to be just a little bit of tone, just a little bit of tone in there to separate that from the background. So the bottle's gorgeous. I like this wood surface. The only thing I don't know that what's going on and what isn't working for me is what's happening with the edge of the glass. It feels cut or warped or weird. It's so not a rounded glass. I don't know what's going on there. That just doesn't feel right. I want to look at the glasses and see what was going on, because that's really odd. A couple other things that I'm seeing. There's a real discrepancy in the coloration on the two garnishes. This one is, got a lot of yellow and kind of orange in it. Even some of the reds. The one in the background is purely going red. And I realize that's more in shadow, but I want to kind of bring those into the same color family a little bit. The last thing I will say, Charlie, is I cannot see a liquid level. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with this glass, but because there are so many vertical facets and there's so much light transferring in it, I cannot see the liquid level. And that, if I was the brand, I'd be like, where is my cocktail? That is one thing that I would caution you about. Overall, though, the composition is really great. I love the heroic kind of bird's eye position where we're looking down on it. It makes the shoulders of this bottle really stand out, and it gives it a nice taper as you move down. It's really a very, very pretty image. My biggest complaint is in the shape of this glass. Like, why is that not elliptical? Why is that not round? That has me blown away. But overall, beautiful image. All right, who do we have here? We've got Corey. All right. Nice, clean, simple image. I actually really like the arrangement of the cans in getting all of the labeling, all of the text to come through. I think that's really cool. The one thing I feel that it needs is more contrast in the actual glass. We have a highlight going on here, and I just wanted to get rounder and deeper on that other side. I feel like the tones over here need to be a little bit deeper. And in that sense, I would probably really tone down this highlight that's over here. I want this side to get deeper because I've got a good highlight here. I've got that natural volume that I want to kind of push. This highlight's a little bit distracting for me. Yeah. Sorry, guys. God, I hate coughing. It's terrible. Anyway, overall, this is a pretty solid image. I think that the little bit of glow that's happening behind the glass could be pushed a little bit more. We could get a little bit deeper as we go to the outer edges. So again, it kind of will push the eye back into the middle. There's a lot of negative space there, which isn't bad, but I feel that it could use a bit of a gradient, a bit of a halo in order to kind of pull the eye in. I think that would be a little bit nicer, but overall, nice shot. And honestly, I really like what's going on with the cans. I think that was a great way to convey this message of what's going on with the cans, because that is not an easy can. All right, Dan Francis. All right, I'm just kind of watching, I'm kind of seeing where my eye goes through this composition. All right, Dan, I want to pick you apart here when it comes to tangents, all right? So I'm going to tell you overall this is a pretty nice image. There's a lot of stuff in here that is working that's very strong. The actual drink itself is really beautiful. I like the highlights that are coming off out of the stem. I see that a lot in my work. These stems tend to really highlight like that. I think the garnish is nice. It's a little bit big, but that's okay. It's well lit, it's intriguing, it's pretty interesting. The one thing I'm struggling with is the fact that the horizon line is directly above the top of the glass. I mean, it's just right on it. And then we get into this totally different tone right here. So I kind of feel like this glass in particular would benefit from the camera perspective dropping down for a couple reasons. One, it's going to take this glass and it's going to raise it up so that this horizon line now drops down low. And I feel like that horizon line could live better down here. It could bisect the body a little bit and not interfere as much. That would also kind of minimize this section a little bit as it would start to drop down behind the glass, and then we get to see more of the bottles. I think the bottles in the background are actually really interesting. These center sections are just kind of lacking tone and lacking light, and that's what I want to minimize a little. So by bringing that cocktail up into it, it would fill it more. Like if this garnish kind of came up into this area right here, I think it would tie in with the top a little bit better. It would drop this down, you get a better horizon, and you would also minimize some of the surface, because right now I think that there's actually too much of the foreground. It's just, we don't need that much. Unless it's needed for a specific advertisement where there's going to be a bunch of text there. This is purely a portfolio image, I'd like to see a little bit of this go away and make the glass more heroic. Quality of light's great. Again, I'm gonna say Dan's done a really good job of getting highlight over here, and it kind of rounds around. It has some nice deeper tones. We do have this bit of highlight coming on here that I think I would thin out, particularly because it has almost like a corner. I would soften that corner, get rid of it, so it's just more of a crescent shape, and then it would lead up better into that garnish. Overall, it's a nice shot. Again, I always want you guys to take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'm just telling you how I feel and what I'm reacting to, but these are your compositions, and I want you to explore them to the fullest. Dan, if you can, go back and try that again. See what happens with this image if you do the same thing but dropping the camera lower and making it more heroic. Clearly, you're going to lose some of the surface, but there's not that much of this top surface anyway. I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. Really, the visuals for the drink are coming in the body and in the garnish. I think it's going to work. All right, David. All right, David. So a couple things we have going on here that I like and a couple things I don't like. All right, quality of steak is really good. I am seeing a discrepancy in the steaks, and I'm going to point it out. So this steak, which is the larger section, doesn't seem to have as much moisture as this steak or this cut of meat. And this is big and heroic, so I want to see it have a little bit more of this kind of juice, this texture to it. This may actually be a little bit heavy. In all honesty, I think that the smaller cut has the right amount of moisture on top of it that's giving it that little bit of glisten, which gives me that kind of spectral highlight that I know you want to see on a steak. It's important to have that little bit of quality. This is something where we've got an overhead shot, but there's good shadow. There's good tone going on. If you look at the tomatoes up on the left side versus the tomatoes on the right side, these tomatoes down here are falling into shadow because there is movement of the light. So I think in this case, this light is really successful in giving it shape and volume. A couple things I'm noticing, the tomatoes that are roasted, there's a bit of a discrepancy. Like this one doesn't look like it's been roasted or touched at all, where this one, you can see the skin is starting to break from the heat, from the roasting. So that's something I'd want to add a little bit more of that roasting element here. Same thing down here. These two are good. There's just a little bit here that's kind of hidden behind the asparagus. I'd almost like to see some more break in that skin so you know it's been roasted a little bit up here. I think the artichokes are really pretty, but boom, tangent. So this is, again, one of those areas where it just kind of dies for me because it's coming right up in this edge of the steak, and boom, there's a little tangent. If this was knocked to the left ever so slightly, you'd see the edge of that steak and it would just have a little bit more presence. I would not want to go the opposite way and bring this artichoke over the potato because those tones are too similar and we're going to lose them. So in this case, I would have just brought that over to over on top of the steak a little bit more. The salt's not bad. You know, the first time I looked at this, I thought the salt was a little bit too clumped in certain spots, and maybe there are a couple that are. I want to see just a little bit more kind of scattered about, but overall it's not bad. The last thing I would say is you got to clean up the gravy boat. So gravy is good. Something like this is really important, but you never want to see those kind of runs like that. Clients won't go for that. The highlight's nice. There's a lot of texture from oil that's in that actual au jus. There's a lot of texture that's showing up in there, and I would probably clean some of that out. I'd keep that highlight, but these areas around the rim, I would really have that cleaned up so it's just the pure white and it just kind of goes right into the liquid. You want to have that little dark edge, but this stuff right here is not something that clients are going to want to see. They're going to want that to go away. So if you're working with a food stylist, have them clean it out. If you're not, do it yourself. Just use Q-tips. Get rid of as much as you can in reality and then clean the rest of it up in post. But for an overhead shot, I really like what's going on here. My eye moves through it nicely. I keep coming back through these hero pieces. There's good shadow, there's good volume. It's a pretty successful shot. So nice job. All right, this is cool. Who do we have here? We have Edward Bowe. All right, nice shot, man. This is really well executed. This is clean. I could see Weber absolutely putting this in an ad. It feels like something that they would have actually commissioned. Clearly, there's a lot of multiple captures and putting this together in post-production. This is really solid. Photographing fire is never an easy trick, and this is really well done because it's not overly done. Clearly, Ed is going to really highlight this brand. There's good highlight on the handle. You can read Weber. There's good shape and volume. These highlights are just a hair wide for me, but nothing to complain about. The grill shows up really well. I like the meat. It's a good cut of meat, and there's a little bit of glow that's coming up from underneath, which is good. You need to have those things to visually tie together, so even though it's totally fake, it doesn't feel totally fake. And I like the garnishes. I like the smoke. The only thing I don't like on the lid is this big highlight right here. That feels distracting, and I kind of want to focus more on the handle and the shape of it. That's probably a very hard highlight to get rid of when shooting, but I kind of just want this Weber here to be hero, the handle to be hero, and kind of mimic what's going on down here with this other handle. So that's the only thing I can say about that. I think the quality of the smoke is great. This is a beautiful shot. And actually, I like the background too. To me, there's a mimicking of the fire, right? So there's this red kind of happening down below, and there's a nice little gradient going up, and then it kind of disappears. So I think that this is a very successful shot. Nice job. All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit and go into some product work. And who is this here? We've got Fernando. Nice image. Clearly, this took a lot of post-production work, a lot of multiple captures in order to make this happen. These things are really tricky. This is actually something I've never attempted in my life, doing this kind of explosive thing where you see parts of something all pulled together, pulled apart, yet you understand that they make a whole. This is a really interesting shot. Honestly, I think that this is, I don't know what the intent was here. I don't know if this was client work or if this was portfolio work, but I can tell you that it is very well composed. There is great use of the entire space. My eye goes through this nicely. There are specific patterns that he has repeated in order for the eye to kind of go through it, and there are other elements that loop the eye back through. Simple things like this belt. It kind of comes up and around, and it takes you back into this area. The way these are shaped, it's leading your eye all the way around. So I want to just kind of pause on this image for a moment just to say this is a great example of how the viewer eye is so critical to composition. So take a look at this, because the way this is laid out, there's a really great sense of the eye moving through the entirety of the image. Even when you come up here to the edge of this piston thing, it draws you back down in, right? Same with the wipers. The way they're shaped, they come back down in. So there's a lot of good movement here that I think is nice. Quality of light's great. Clearly everything floating, so the shadow is just a little bit of fake to give it a bit of grounding. I think that shadow could actually be widened or made bigger. Just because there's so much substantially going on here, this thin little shadow feels totally unrealistic. Granted, this whole thing is unrealistic, but I love it. I think it's a really cool shot. I was so much in food and beverage mode, it was kind of odd to go there, but nice image, dude. All right, Francesco. Okay, so this image I'm gonna question because I don't know what we're selling here. Are we selling food or are we selling smoke and rocks? And I say that because I know in my heart that this is a food shoot. However, the food is taking up maybe 10% of this image at most, and the rest of it is rock and smoke. So this is an image where I'd say I'd want to tighten up the composition quite a bit. We do not need to see all of this rock or all of these rocks down here because we're losing what this food is. I can't even tell what the food is because it's kind of pushed back in the distance so much. It's oysters, right? It's some sort of heavily garnished oysters, but I honestly can't see that. It could be like a fruit salad in an oyster shell, but that's a difficult thing for me. So I'm going to caution you here to say, come in a little bit. I like the concept a lot. I think that the concept went too far. I'd really be curious to see what it looks like if you just even came in really tight and saw one rock, the oyster shells, maybe a hint of another rock in the foreground or something out of focus, and something in the background. Maybe tone down the smoke a little bit so it isn't quite so bright and quite so hot, so that the eye stays on the food. Because I want to see the styling. I think that there's some really interesting stuff going on here, but because the food is so far, it's so small in the frame, I really can't tell what's going on. So if I put myself in the position of the client, I'm gonna say, all right, where's my food, man? I see an image of rock and smoke, but I don't see an image of my food. So that's always something you want to be conscious of, is kind of balancing the idea of being creative with really understanding a product and selling that product. At the end of the day, when we're making images, it's not for us, it's for our clients, and we have to sell their product. So I think that there's a good idea here, and I'd love to see you go back and reshoot this and make those the food a lot more heroic, because I think that there could be some real success with this concept. All right, George Mitchell, this is a pretty beautiful image. All right, I'm gonna take it just a second to let my eye kind of go through the composition. All right, so George, overall, I think you've got some really nice stuff going on here. There's a lot of good quality of light that's going on in both the canister and in the actual bottle itself. I love this quality of light. I love the little highlight here that's on the left edge. It really is giving this entire bottle a lot of shape, and you've got it matched over here with a white highlight on the surface, which I actually like here. I think that that's nice. It's not overdone. This little bit of yellow up here in the neck, I would match to another tone in the neck, so it's not this kind of gold sticking out, because that kind of bugs me. When I photograph kind of from a low perspective, looking up like this, I will actually take an X-Acto knife and cut the back side of the wrap, the necker off, because I really just kind of want to see the front side of it. I don't always want to see the back side. By having the back side, I think in many ways it does give it more shape and volume, but to me it's not lending itself to much here. So I kind of carefully mark where the edges are, and then I'll just cut up on the back side of it, and then I have more glass, let more of the background come through. I think it could have benefited from here, or that could have benefited here. I would say I would caution about the 12 on both of these. I feel like they need to be more gold than they are. I think that they're printed in a more gold way, and I might take a dull-ish gold card and hold it in there and reflect some light back in there just to get that to pop a little bit. And I'd be pretty cognizant to make that 12 and that 12 match, because they're so disparate right now. And you can tell that everything really, they've done this in a family, so everything should match, but those two don't. And I think that a brand would really want that. This is that quality of light that I was talking about. This is a great example of the highlight coming onto the left, and it's starting to do a gradient on the right, and I'm really getting the shape of that. So by the sheer fact that he's got this highlight here and it's wrapping around, that's giving the bottle a lot more volume, and I think it's very successful. I think that the glasses actually they might be suffering a little bit because there's not rocks in it, and I feel like in a cut glass like this could actually benefit from having a rock so that there's more contrast in it. It's really kind of flat in there, except in the instance of the cut. I think if you were doing a neat, I would do a glass that was actually neater, where you could put a better gradient in there and not have these weird shapes kind of coming in from the cut crystal. That's a personal preference. I just feel like that's something that I would do. The last thing I think is that there's a good amount of highlight that's hitting the surface, particularly these two red napkins and right here. I would just push those down and post a little bit. I think that the red is a little bit too bright, particularly when you look in comparison to some of the things that are going on in the bottle. My eye kind of goes down and pulls into that red, and I don't want it to do that. So I would tone that down. But great job. It's really beautiful, George. All right. We've got Geo here. All right. So this image is interesting. I like what's going on with the actual layout. There's some really cool things that are happening with the shapes and what is going on in the background. What doesn't match for me is the shape of the phone. It's actually so flat compared to all the geometry going on here that I'm not quite sure how to handle it. It's interesting what's going on the inside too. It's kind of a really warped or kind of pushed version of what's going on out here. I got to ponder this one a little bit. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think that there's some really solid stuff going on. Like I said, I like the pedestal. I like the quality of light that's going on in here. I almost feel like the phone needs to be turned, that it needs to be rotated a bit so that we see more dimension, or it needs to be rotated and tipped back. Just because now there are all these angles going on, and then this very flat surface where we're kind of filling in on the inside. I want to actually see more of the phone, and I'm putting myself in the position of the product manager saying, I want to see more of the phone. And this is something where I would be cautious of that background light bleeding too much onto the surface of the actual phone, because particularly right here on this edge, it's picking up all that kind of red pink, and we're losing some of the shape. Same thing over here, we're kind of losing some of that shape, and I want to see more of that black pop. I think this is a really cool concept. I want to see that phone have more dimension. I think you need to rotate it, maybe pitch it back, and play with it a little bit, because I think that would help. Overall, it's a really cool concept though. I love the idea, and this is something to continue to explore for sure. Greg, oh, this is nice. I love this. Vodka, makeup, and pills. That tells a story, doesn't it? All right. So there's a lot going on in this image, and I'm letting my eye kind of move through it. And what I'm finding is happening is my eye starts up here with the absolute vanilla. And it's kind of being pushed down, and I'm definitely reading all of the jewelry, and I'm coming into this negative space. This space actually feels a little blank, and I kind of want to bring this cocktail in a little bit more and make it a little bit more heroic. Just because I feel like it's being lost. And I know, the intent here is to kind of push the idea of absolute and this cocktail, but this cocktail is kind of getting lost for me. So I kind of want to bring it into this area a little bit more, particularly where there's this highlight coming in. I think that highlight kind of going into the actual cocktail, and then maybe having some light cast onto the lime from that streak of light could have been nice. This might also be an instance where, even though I like the shape and the size of that glass, I might scale it up just a little bit. Grab the drink and scale it up 10%, just so it's a little bit bigger and a little bit more prominent. I love this quality of light. There's great tone up here, and it's pushing me down in. But things in the shadows aren't being lost. This lipstick has a really nice quality of light coming through. The light coming through the Q-tips is really beautiful. I love this dappling. We are losing a little bit of tone there on the wedge, but that is not a big deal. This is a gorgeous image. Honestly, I want you guys to go back and look at this, because I think this is a really great use of space. There is so much going on, and even as I'm continuing to look through it, now I'm noticing this little glass container of makeup wedges here that I didn't even notice before. I'm kind of coming down here, and I'm seeing the lid to, I'm sure, the Q-tip jar. Really beautiful tones on it. It's picking up the tones here and bringing it out to the outer edge, and it's really creating a nice complement. But I also love this kind of gradient warmth, where you've got this kind of warm tone up here, it's pushing down, and we're getting these beautiful blues. It's a really pretty image. Nice shot. And I know this was intentional to have this kind of negative space. I wouldn't want to totally eliminate it. Again, I would just want to bring this cocktail over a little bit and then blow it up a little bit, because I think it's really cool. Nice shot, man. All right, Jan. Very clean, nice product shot. I'm assuming this was actually done for client work and not just done on spec. So overall, I would actually love to see just a little bit more shadow. I think that the shadows here are nice. This could use a little bit more shadow on this side, because I do see shadow going on here, kind of in between the shoes, and just a hair on the toe, but there's really not much over here. This shadow is so soft and so subtle. I think it could use from just a little bit of a push. So I was kind of pulling this apart in terms of tangents, where I just want the front glass to come forward a little. I want the front glass to come forward a little bit more, have it drop down in the frame, maybe even cut off the front of this coaster just a bit. That's going to give breathing room to this line, and that's going to get rid of these tangents up here, because these tangents kind of bug me a little bit, where we're just having that. There's good movement from left to right. This line is totally blowing out. I'd love to see some recovery there, just to have a little bit of interest in there. And I wonder if there should be a little bit of shadow, just something kind of coming in this upper left area to give it a little bit of grounding. I see some of it back here, which I like, and I almost want just a hint there. But overall, this is a really solid image. I think that the drinks are really well done. There's the right amount of condensation. There's not a lot of condensation up above. You might want to clean out this area a little bit where there is condensation on the glass above the liquid line. I tend to not show that. It just looks a little bit better if it's cleaner, but overall, this is a really pretty image. Okay, we've got Jennifer. Whew, Jennifer, this is stunning. I mean, this shot is beautiful. Again, so we're going back into this overhead food shot, and we seem to like this a lot. Overhead definitely lends itself to showing food in a pretty unusual and pretty beautiful way. This has got a lot of stuff going for it that's just really solid. First and foremost is the use of color. I think Jennifer's done a really good job of using colors that work very well together. The reds against the kind of blue, almost black blues are really nice. And then you've got these clams and these mussels over here that tie back in. But if you notice, they're actually in shadow. Like the strong sense of light is coming here and it's moving across. I think that there could be a little bit more shadow on the fish itself on the bottom side, because you're getting that sense of these mussels and these clams falling into a little bit of shadow. I love the use of the real ice. The lemons look a little bit washed out to me. I think that they just need a hair more vibrance. But I love the treatment of the herbs. The only thing I see that I don't love is this little bit of thyme that's kind of coming across on the fish. I almost want to see more of that because there's just this little sprig. But my God, that is really nitpicking. There's not a lot here that I can pull apart. This is a beautiful image and it's really well executed. Yeah, Jennifer, again, I think if you had a little bit of shadowing on the bottom side of the fish, so it felt a little bit more sense of light coming from here moving across, just throw this into a little bit of shadow, which you can do in post. I think that's all you need to do because this image is stunning. I mean, I would print that and put it in my book. In fact, God, do that as a double, as a full spread. It's beautiful. And the detail in here too, like on this fin, this is really beautiful work. Okay, Yuri. This is also a really pretty image. I see a lot of good stuff happening here. What I like about this image is it feels like I have kind of been caught in the moment. Like you're at this bar and this is kind of naturally happening. Now clearly Yuri has set all this up and he's done a lot of thinking about how everything is going to go, but he's done a really good job. If you look at the very simple things, the shape of the arm, it's moving down here and it goes into the cocktail shaker, which takes us down into the other items, the jigger, the little bit of dried fruit, the bullets, and they bring us right back up. We come now, the light takes us, pushes us across, we hit this kind of shadow area which has light above it, and we kind of go right back up, right into the hands, and then takes us back down, right into the hero on the cocktail, which is what we want. And we get this great action. He's done a really great job of lighting all of the spritz coming off of the orange peel. It's really well done. You know, the only thing I'm not sure about is the distraction of the bracelets. That's the only thing I don't know about this, to be perfectly honest, and that's kind of nitpicking. This glass could, or this bottle could come in ever so slightly, but I love the garnishes here. I even love this little hit of garnish that's up on the top. It feels like that the leaves are just a little bit browning at the edges, and I would clean those out so that they had green and highlight just like this one does, because that's so beautiful. It's so subtle, but like, look at that shape. It's a really simple little shape, and what does it do? It pushes your eye back here. So when your eye does transpose out to this edge, it has this shape and this form that follows, and it brings you back. That's a great use of an element as a visual cue to push you back down into the hands, into the action, and into the cocktail. Cocktail looks pretty good. I think it could use just a hit more contrast. It could be pushed just a little bit more, maybe a little bit deeper in the dark areas down below, but it's really well done. This is an image, boom, print this and put this in your book. It's fabulous. And you know, again, there's a little bit of stuff going on in the background. It's not distracting. In fact, I'm just really kind of noticing it now. There's stuff there that gives me depth, and it's not just falling into blackness. It feels like there's a good amount of space back here, but it's all supporting this action. And that's really, really key. So this is a really well done image. Come back and study this one. I like it a lot. Whew, this one's gorgeous. Kevin. All right, Kevin. Man, this is a stunning image. I love the use of negative space here. This is really simple, really elegant, and very, very well executed. I can tell you that this was not something that Kevin just slapped down and took a shot of. All of these little undulations in the fabric took time because he was trying to get the lines and the shadows right to have movement, and there really is some nice movement. You've got the light coming from this upper right corner. It's pushing a beautiful highlight down. We know that this is probably a bottle of Dewar's, but it's nicely hidden. We just see a little bit of it, and we're really getting the sense of the liquid from the shadow, from the reflection that's coming down in here, which is gorgeous. You do obviously see it in the glass. It's hard to see the liquid line. In fact, it's impossible almost to see the liquid line. It's really kind of disappearing. You see the tone. In this case, I might actually suggest putting a little bit more liquid in it. I think sometimes we struggle with having a glass that's too full because you don't want to pour somebody a 16-ounce shot of scotch because that's just a lot. But this might benefit from having a little bit more liquid kind of coming up where you could see the liquid level and read it a little bit better. But I love it. I love the cracked walnuts coming down here. The pears, again, we have the light moving from the right to the left, and it's really well done. There's just this simple movement going from right all the way down to the left, but it's broken up nicely with the shadows and these vertical pieces of fabric that are really soft and kind of moving around. I think this is an exceptionally done image. I don't mind this negative space here either. I'm sitting here kind of debating whether I want to see something down there, and I don't think I do. It kind of adds to the mystery of it. You know that there's more space there, but it's nice. All right, Christy. All right, so there is a lot going on here, and there's actually too much going on here. I'm struggling with this a little bit because there's a lot that's happening with the food, but I'm getting lost in the background. Because the background is significantly brighter than the food, and clearly it's outside, it's daylight, it's a strong light source, but it's overpowering what's happening here on the food. And some of this food is so far down on the frame, and there's a lot of headroom. So I would actually recommend that this frame be shifted. That if the crop came down where you see the totality of this plate and this meat became a little bit more heroic, I think that we don't need to see as much of what's going on here. outside the window. I think if that was reduced, it would help push our eye back down. Because again, there's some nice stuff happening with the oysters and the bread and the bruschetta and even this salad. I think that it's getting lost because look at how much of the frame is taking up. If I bring my cursor over here, the food is really only taking up the bottom quarter of the image. If you look all the way above, you really have 3/4 of the image that is a little bit of wine and a lot of foliage in a table. I want to reduce that. I would also clone out things like this stop sign, like that. I just don't want to see the back of a stop sign in there, so I would absolutely get rid of that. But I would try shifting this down and having this become more heroic. I'd push a little bit more red into that meat because I think it could use it and maybe just to hit more light. Overall, I like when people attempt this much food because this is not an easy thing to pull off. It's definitely a bit of a trick, and I like it. I would encourage you to either play with your crop if you've got enough room, or go back and try this concept again and eliminate some of the outside. It's pretty out there, but it's actually overpowering the food, and that's making it not achieve the goal that you really want it to. All right, Kyle. All right, Kyle, I'm going to piggyback on what I just said on the last image and say that there's too much image up above. This is a little top heavy. As a general rule, if you think about the way images are framed, if we look at images that are hanging on a wall, the mat, the way it's constructed, the top and the sides always have equal amounts, and the bottom has a little bit more. And I'm talking about the mat that's outside of the image, outside of the painting. It's weighted. It's weighted on the bottom. So when I look at an image like this, it's actually weighted in reverse. There's too much that's going up on the top of the image, and that's distracting me. I want more down below. I actually want to see this kind of cropped in, see more surface, but get rid of some of what's going on up above. The food is really simple. The use of honey is well done here, and there's actually good form and shape. I might push the background back a little bit further. I think I want to soften it a little bit. There's something kind of interesting. So this is a piece of galvanized metal in the background. And in some ways, the galvanizing actually mimics the idea of the flaky biscuit, right? Because there are these little flakes that are happening all over that. So that's kind of interesting, but it's graying out a little bit. This is a case, Kyle, where I might actually take a silver card behind me and push some silver color back into it just to get a little bit more tone of silver and a little less gray, because I think that's kind of an interesting background to use. I want to see it pushed a little bit, but I like what's going on with the food. It's a really simple composition. Again, I think some of this is just cropping. I would definitely get rid of a lot of what's going up on the top and weight it to the bottom a little bit more. And next time you're in a museum, or even if you look at the prints that you have hanging on your wall, look at that. You'll definitely notice that the way the mat is around the frame. You've got equal distances on the top and the sides, and there's more on the bottom. There's visual weight that just makes sense to our brains when we have something a little bit more on the bottom. That's something that you want to look at when you're actually making images as well. That's pretty cool. Law. All right, this is a nice shot. All right, Law. Overall, I really like this. Again, I'm going to say that let's come in. This is becoming so much about the smoke up above. It's top heavy, and we're losing so much of the cocktail and the hero of it. This is beautiful, and there's great light and a lot of cool visual interest that's happening with the smoke, particularly like this wisp that's coming off. But as we get up here to the top, it really starts to dissipate, and it's not giving us as much. And I think our eye is tending to go up here, and it's remaining versus coming down here and being in the cocktail. Interesting use of the ice, because this is ice that isn't really clear. It's got a lot of minerals in it. And actually, if you do ice cubes like this, I would recommend that you boil the water first and then freeze it, because you'll actually get a much clearer cube. It's kind of cool what's going on the inside here, because there's these like striations. It almost feels like this kind of starburst in there, which to me somehow matches his orange rind. I love the use of the little pin, that little clip as part of the garnish. I think that's awesome. But again, I want to come in, I want to see more of it. I love what's going on down below. I just want to crop in. Let's just look at this image again, just cropped in so that it's much more heroic. Because again, think about where this image is sitting. If my cursor right here is about the halfway point, half of the image down below is the cocktail, but really less than that because it's sitting on a pedestal. And then half is just the smoke and the darkness up above. We don't need to tell that much story about the smoke. We need to tell more about the cocktail. So I would crop in. Quality of light's nice. This highlight's a little bit strong. Might want to tone that down a little bit so it's not quite so, it's not so as wide. Like this highlight over here seems right. I would just tone that down a little bit. All right, Martin. All right, back to another product shot, which we don't have much of, but this is really nice and really simple. The message is really clear to me. You know, the idea of using gears, clearly a fine made watch is going to have a set of really finely made gears on the inside of it. So that play is really nice. Very good quality of light. I think a little bit more light could kind of come here in the middle. It's hottest right here, which that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that's where my eye remains, right? So wherever the hot spots are, our eyes are going to go and they're going to stay in that spot. In this case, we actually want it to be here. So I think even in post-production, you can do this, is just grab this section here and start to push it a little bit hotter and give it a gradient as it goes down. That is a really simple fix in post-production and you'll be fine. I would recommend when you shoot something like this, just throw in a card to kind of pick up some of the edges here so that you can pull them out and blend a couple of exposures. Clearly, it's nice to have some of this dark and kind of disappearing, but I don't want the edges of the watch to disappear completely. Love to see them pop out here just a little bit and here a little bit. And another exposure with a white or gold card. You could also take a gold card and hold that gold card in there to reflect gold into the gold, which is in many ways much nicer because you're getting more of a true representation of the tone. Matt, are we okay or did we lose? Okay. Just checking, I'm a little nervous about the connection here. All right, Mika. All right, this is a pretty nice image. All right, Mika, I like this image a lot. I will say that my eye is getting caught up here. There's a really strong sense of light here, and I think if you were just to play with this and knock it down a little bit, this will be more of a supporting role to what's going on down here. This food is really beautiful. I absolutely love the food styling. Whoever you worked with, or if you did this yourself, you did a great job. The herbs are really pretty coming in here on the edge. I like this little hit of purple down here. There's just a little bit of fabric and a couple of things there that I would clean up, but this is really a great shape. This is the kind of stuff that my stylist and I work on to get that kind of natural, feels like it just fell into place kind of napkin, but it does take so much work to do. This is great. It's really simple. The crispy skin is good, but there's a little too much highlight on it. I would again recommend using a polarizer. I think that this dish could have used a polarizer in two places. One, on the skin to knock down some of that highlight so it isn't so vibrant. If you look up here, I love what's going on in this area with the skin. You've got great tone, you've got highlight on the little ridges, but you don't have highlight taking over as you do down here. The polarizer would take care of that. The polarizer would also help with this highlight. This is a pretty strong highlight that's just kind of taking over the plate, so our eye kind of winds up here. Polarizer would help knock that down, something you could do in a separate exposure. You could certainly brush some of that out, but again, I try to capture everything as I can in camera, and that would have been great to do with just a polarizer. If you're not using a polarizer, I highly encourage you to do so on both your camera and on your main light. It does wonders for you. So overall, the sense of color is great. I love the way these blues and purples and greens are supporting. They're contrasting with the yellow. That's the liquid. Looks like Saint Germain in a glass, just kind of on the, in a glass up. But that tone is really nice because it again plays in with all the tones that are going on here in the dish, and it really ties it all together. So I think that's pretty successful. My eye does tend to pop up here, so I think if you burn that down a little bit, you're going to be in good shape. Nice image though. There's really not much that you have to do to that. You can fix a lot of that in post and call it a day. All right. Osman. Okay, so this was clearly done for a particular client, and they've included all of the text and everything that we know. So, including the texture that's kind of going over it. So I'm going to say, first and foremost, I'm sure you achieved the goal that the client was looking for, and I think that there's some good things here. Again, I'm going to point out a tangent. We've got these tangents right here. So this horizontal line is coming right into the top of the lemon, and that's creating a big spot for me. We're actually losing the straw. The straw is really hidden kind of behind the lemon. I can see that there are the grooves here where it's a bendy straw. It's intended to, to be bent so somebody can drink from it easier, but it's just this perfectly vertical element. I think in this case, I actually might kind of bend it down so that it, or remove it. I don't even know that it's needed. In fact, if it wasn't there, it might help. And again, I think it would have come maybe slightly lower, or just push this lemon wedge down a little bit just to break this. But there's good light movement happening here. It's pushing us into the cocktail. I think that this drink could use a little bit more of vibrance on the inside. I think you could do that easily with a curve. Just kind of push that up. It could use just a little bit of almost like a glow in there. Could also add a little bit of a backlight to it, and I don't think it would hurt to have a little spotlight coming in and just kind of hitting the backside of that glass to give it a little bit of punch. But overall, I think it's a nice shot. I'm sure that the client was happy with it. The only thing that really bothers me is the straw and that tangent. And you guys are going to hear me say this over and over again. Tangents make me crazy. So look for them. I see them so easily. All right. Pablo. All right. I'm letting my eye wander through this a bit, and I'm seeing some things that are really strong and a couple things I want to fix. So, strong parts. Like this is really nice, actually. You see the highlight and the shape on this metal. There's a lot of good reflection that's going on in there. We get the highlight coming off of the main light. You can see the texture that's in the metal itself. There's good shadow going onto it. You see the cheese reflected into it. There's a lot going on in that little bit, but it gives us a lot of information that all works to our benefit. The bottle itself is needing light to come through it. Almost the entirety of the bottle is surface lit. You can see that we've got light coming through the bottle up here, and that's because there's no liquid above that spot, and the light is coming off of the cocktail or the drink in the background. It's pushing through there and is lighting up. This is the kind of tone that I want to see carried down in here. It's going to be really hard to get it down there in that label, but I would love to see some tone carried out through here to light the inside of that bottle. It's really critical for a bottle to have that. The label itself is a little flat. Again, I want to see a little bit more of this highlight that's here, be a little bit brighter, and have it darken to the edge just a little bit because it feels a little bit too flat over here. The other thing I'm noticing is that this stem is right on the edge of that bottle. It's just right on the very edge. I want to push that out to the right just a little bit. I don't know where that's going to start to form a break as this tapers, right? It's going to taper in here, so he may have been working with where that was hiding in the backside, but it's just a little bit tight right here. I'd love to see a little bit of breathing space and a little bit more of that black line of the inside of the stem be a little bit wider, because it's going to give that bottle more shape. By having that black go against that bottle, it's going to give it more of an edge and it's going to give it more shape. Quality of light's really nice. But yeah, a little bit more on the label. Definitely needs some glow coming through. I think the spritz is really nice. Even like a couple of these areas where it's run off, it just feels really natural. I think the spritz is really well done. So overall, nice shot. Palo. All right, that is really beautiful and really simple. Now, again, the only thing I want to do to this is play with cropping. I would love to see Paulo come in and maybe crop out that top edge, kind of come down here, keep the bottom edge open, and take off some of this. Because again, what we're doing is negative space is really great and it's really important in an image. It gives us breathing room. It kind of gives us license. But look at the size of the food in comparison to the entire image. You've got maybe 10% of this, not even. Maybe, let's just call it 10%. 10% of this image is food, and the rest is negative space. Now, it's pretty negative space because there's good quality light. I love this little bit of glow that's happening around the actual plate. And then it kind of it does a nice gradient out to the edges. I love what's going on here with this light. I just think if you crop this in, you've got a real winner. It's beautiful food styling. It's a beautiful image. I just want to come in on it. Well done. All right, Peter. Okay, Peter, I think that overall this is a pretty successful shot. Guys, this is what I'm talking about with that quality of light, where we've got light moving from the upper left and the shadow areas are falling into shadow. There's detail in there. You can see everything that's going on with the fries and the endive. It's all there. It's just falling into shadow, and there's shadow coming off of the plate. There's more shadow created by the endive. There's shadow on the plate from the ramekin with the ketchup in it. That is, to me, really important, and I love what's going on here. The only thing I don't like is the positioning of the actual plate itself. It feels like it's rotated clockwise just a little too much. Either it needs to be significantly more, or this edge needs to be a pure vertical. I think I would have played with that a little bit. The food styling is great. There's great tonal quality in here. You really can't see the hot dog at all. It's a lot of condiment, but that's probably okay, because that's what the mission was. I would probably clean out some of this divot right here that's in the bread. That's natural, that happens. I would kind of clean some of that out, and maybe some of this scarring, because I know my clients like craft, that stuff, they would absolutely demand that stuff go away. Yeah, it's absolutely natural and it happens, but I would eliminate it a little bit. And the last thing I would recommend would be to take a gold card and pop a little light through the beer. This beer is pretty nice. That head could be just a little bit more full. I would use the trick that I've taught people with a chopstick, just to get it a little bit more full. This is not bad, but I just want to see a little bit more light. And I would probably put that gold card over here to kick that so that the glow comes in and we get a little bit. See this reflection that's happening right here on the right? I'd love for it to come down just a little bit, kind of follow that direction. But overall, it's a really nice shot. Ooh. Raul, this is pretty. Holy smokes. I don't know that I saw this shot before, and I love this. There is a client that I used to shoot for all the time, a chocolate company, and they would go crazy for this. Man, all right. Right off the bat, I don't know that I can find anything wrong with this. I think that the composition is really strong. Quality of light's great. Perhaps you could use a polarizer to not eliminate these highlights, but to pull more of the brown chocolate tone in them, so they're a little less white, but they still maintain a highlight. Kind of like what's going on here, where you have more texture. There's clearly a lot more texture in here, which is creating more visual. It's in highlight, but it's not like the smoother part of the chocolate that's really taking the modifier, the light modifier, and it's just kind of whiting out. So polarizer would have helped up there. Here, I don't mind it at all. Again, you have a lot more texture in it, and it's really nice. The use of coffee beans and chocolate are great. Man, background's really beautiful. I love the vignette. You can see how it goes darker into the corners. We've got this nice shape that allows the chocolate to pop off. Perhaps there could be just a hair more light in between those rows of chocolate to give it a little pop. The only other thing I could suggest is maybe cropping off this left edge a little bit. This one chocolate's just falling out, and we have the totality of the cup over here. In this case, it might be nice just to lose a little sliver of that cup, so it's kind of cropped in a little bit, and it feels like you're seeing more of a piece of this. Kind of how we're seeing a piece of the wooden surface, like wooden doily, which I really like. This is a beautiful composition, really well done. Love this image. All right, Renji, I didn't say that right. Regine? Don't know how to say your name. I butchered it, I'm sure. Please forgive me. Overall, this is a really pretty image. So this is something that I feel like we can all gravitate towards. This definitely makes sense. It feels like you're in a spa. This is nice. So a couple things here. Man, quality of light is really good. I think that that contrast could be pushed just a little bit. It feels a little washed out overall, but the tone of that is really nice, and it definitely feels like it's going to be, you know, spa-like. The one thing I'll say is it feels like this tea is just dripping out. It doesn't feel like it's pouring at all. It just feels like it's dripping straight down. So I think I would practice on that to get more of a pour. In that case, the teapot could have gone to the right just a little bit, and you get more of this pour that kind of hits into the center. The other thing that I'm seeing is that this out of focus honey element, where you have the honey stick and the little ramekin of honey, it is dead center. It's cutting in front of the cookies that are pretty important, and it's out of focus. So in this case, I think this might benefit from it being off to the side. It could still intersect with the cookies a little bit. Like if it came in front of that edge and then led the eye out, kind of mimic that arm a little bit, and I think that would be nice. That's the only thing I see in this composition that I'm not in love with, that and the pour itself. But quality of light's really nice. I may want to rotate this actually. When I look at it, there's a lot of information here that we just don't need. I think that could be rotated a little bit and just make this tin of tea a little bit more heroic. But overall, it's a pretty image. It has a good spa quality to it. Richard. All right, Richard, I love this shot. Love this shot. This was certainly a lot to put together in post-production to get this incredible twist of gin that's looking like almost like a lime, you know, twist going all the way up. A lot went into that. It's really well done. The one thing I think this needs is contrast. And maybe it's just the quality of the image that was submitted to us, but it feels a little washed out. There's a little bit of glow going on back here. I want to see that glow pushed. I want to see the darks pushed a little bit more in the glass, also in the actual liquid. I think that could use a little bit more contrast. And I would vignette these edges a little bit. I think the edges could use to just be toned down in the corners so that it pushes our eye again into this. The Tanqueray, the silvers feel a little gray. So I want to ask if you used a silver card to reflect into that. I think this is a case where you definitely need to reflect silver into it and not white. White can tend to either be too hot so it's white, or when you tone it down, it starts to look a little bit gray. Using a silver card is a better play. But overall, I think this is a pretty nice image. I think you can honestly get most of the way there just by doing a little post-production work, getting a bit more of a vignette, adding a little bit of contrast. Don't push it too much. Just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But this is pretty cool. Seems to be something going on here, too, that's a little funky. I would just double check that in post. It feels a little smeared. That, again, might be the quality of the image that was submitted and not an actual blemish on the image itself. But I would just double check it. Richard, overall, it is Richard, yeah. Overall, that is a really stunning image. You should be proud of that. All right, Robert. All right, this is cool. I like this image. Now, a couple things. Again, we've got half of the image or more being kind of negative space and the smoke coming off. We did have a quick conversation here in the studio about this image, what was going on. People are like, why is steam coming off of it? I know it's not steam. It's absolutely smoke. And this is one of those whiskeys or scotches that you might smoke, where you put a little brick of charcoal or a little piece of wood under a glass after you've lit it. It smokes, and then you let that flavor the whiskey or the scotch. Now, to convey that message, it might be good to have a little of that on the surface. In this case, I'm not suggesting that we need this. I think, honestly, this could benefit from being a cropped in. I would look at putting an 11 by 14 proportion crop on this and getting rid of some of the stuff up above. I think the really sexy, pretty part of the smoke is right in here. These wisps are really nice. This stuff, as it goes blue, is cool, but it's not doing it as much for me. And again, we're making the cocktail less important by not making it larger. Yeah, cropping. I've seen this in a couple of your images, guys, and I want to encourage you to play with it. And you know, you can always crop an image 4 or 5 different ways and kind of see how you like them. Put them side by side and look at it. Try to make things as heroic as you can. When brand managers are looking at your images and they're thinking about hiring you for a brand, they would definitely want their product to be as heroic as possible. This is a really sexy image. The quality of light is great. One of the things that he's done really well here is light the top rim. Clearly he's got a pan head or some sort of light up above that's pushing straight down. It's giving us not only great highlights here, it's giving us good highlights on the surface, it's giving us good highlights on the bottom puck of the glass where it's concave, and it's giving us good highlights that are hitting the surface. That's a great use of light, very simple trick on a cocktail and extremely effective, so nice job. Rumen. All right, this is a pretty image. I actually love these Pellegrino bottles. I've shot them myself before, and I think that this image is really solid. I love what's going on here. The one thing I want to do is actually pale out some of the colors in the background. I feel like the drink itself is kind of pale. I just want to almost desaturate that to see what happens. But I love this. This is a really fun, simple image. It conveys the theme of party. Again, sociability. Even though this is non-alcoholic, you have this idea of multiple people getting together, sharing stories, enjoying a time. And there's a nice flow to this, right? So let's talk about this just ever so quickly. Rumen's done a really good job of arranging these bottles. So we have our hero right in the middle, right? It's tack sharp. You see every bit of that straw that's coming off. You really get the form from the bend portion of it. It's just nice and crisp right here. This is our hero. And he's done a really good job of lining it. We've got bottles kind of going around it. We have other bendy straws that are moving us around. And our eye just continues to go around right down to the caps that are on the surface. We see the little bit of very fine confetti, and we come back into it. Great use of composition leading the viewer's eye. Come back and study this image. He's done a really, really solid job of leading the viewer's eye through. This is also an 11x14 crop. Like I just mentioned on the last cocktail, I think it could benefit from that. Rumen, beautiful shot. The only thing I want to see you do is maybe desaturate this background just a little bit. See what it looks like paling that out, because I think it's a really pretty image. All right. Stefania. All right, this is a pretty clean product shot. So a couple things I'm seeing here. So the highlights on this bottle feel pretty intense. I see big soft boxes coming down on both sides, and this is something that I would really want to feather. I think that this highlight needs to be about half the size that it is, and this highlight needs to be about maybe a quarter of what it is. Again, because I want that sense of light source coming from the left and wrapping around. There's a lot of light coming down here. It's almost kind of blowing out. It's a very clean, simple shot. This is something that I know a lot of clients would want, but you can actually give this a little bit more volume by just feathering these things off. So the soft boxes, when they're on the sides like that, play with them. Simply by taking them and pitching them towards your camera, you can start to feather it off. So instead of using all of this surface, instead of using all the surface of the front of the softbox, you start to feather it, right? And you're using a more narrow portion. So instead of this wide, as I feather it, I'm turning it that way. So I tend to use that. I will bring my lights and I'll start to feather them back towards my camera, which will narrow out the highlights. And then you can also push them back. Because as you feather them, they're gonna start to come more center, but then you can take them straight back on your set and just have a thinner line that gets closer to the edge. So I like where it's positioned on the edge. I just want, seriously, like more than half of that to go away. Just be a thinner highlight. I think that the box itself is a little flat as well. It could use a little bit of a gradient. The actual embossing is really important here. So this is probably something I do in a couple captures where she's done a great job having all that glow come across. I just might do another capture where I get a little bit more of a light source kind of coming across so that some of this area goes a little bit darker and we focus more on the label. Overall, it's a really clean shot. As is, a lot of clients would be really happy to put that on their website to show their product. All right, Tony Tony Smith's daughter. Wait, Tony Smith's daughter, she's 15? Is that right? Mm-hmm. A 15-year-old girl shot this?
Yeah.
Tony Smith's daughter crushing it for a 15-year-old. This is seriously impressive. All right, if this is the same Tony Smith I'm thinking about, he's been a photographer for a very long time. So Tony Smith's daughter, you're doing a great job. You've learned from your dad. All right. All right, guys, let's talk about this. Because again, we have another overhead shot, and overhead shots seem to be more thematic than anything in the food that was submitted in this particular round. There's a lot of nice stuff going on here. You know, a shot like this is kind of meant to feel like it's natural and it's just happening at somebody's house, even though this doesn't happen. Like, we never have strawberries that are that tight. But what is working is the way the eye is moving. So there is a good flow coming on through here. This plate could go down just a little bit, but honestly, she's got a really good quality of light. I could see a little bit more shadow happening, perhaps. We do have a good amount of shadow coming off, and it's just filling in. But this is, again, one of those things where the surface itself is so dark that it's hard to read the values. Yes, you do see it here coming off of this little bit of honey. I assume that's honey. We could use a little bit more light in the tea, not much, but that's actually pretty nice. Overall, she's done a really good job. I'm very impressed. If a 15-year-old did this, I am super impressed. I don't have tangents I can really pick apart here. Maybe here, I could say that's kind of close, but there's one tangent right there. So yeah, we could pick that apart. Maybe that cup could have gone up a little bit, and that handle could have gone out to the right just a little bit. But man, Tony Smith's daughter, nice job. I'm really impressed. Really very impressed. Keep doing it. I can't wait to see what you can do by the time you're 17. Holy smokes. All right, Yaya Tea House. Is that right? All right, I like it. Okay, this is an interesting image. All right, I'm not sure how I feel about this one yet. This is one I haven't seen yet. So this is kind of interesting, and I'm gonna tell you, I feel like what's going on, I'm so sorry. I feel like what's going on with the water, the liquid that's coming down, isn't quite voluminous enough. It feels like a pretty thin little bit of water coming down. It's hitting on the top. It feels like a totally separate capture, like they don't feel connected, and I feel like it needs to be more voluminous. We're also getting some weird runs that are coming down the background, or the back of the bottle, which I want to caution you against. The background is actually kind of interesting. We are getting some banding here, and that's something you don't want to have. There's a pretty harsh band that hits from there to there. I think it's an interesting use of the background, but what it kind of futzes with is the inside of the bottle. I'm not sure I have a solution on this one yet. I do want to see just more going on with the water. It's pretty intense down here on this almost like puck of a stand, and then it gets into these tiny little bitty bubbles or droplets of water. I feel like the water needs to be pushed a lot more. It needs to be more voluminous. And I want to see a little bit more happen with the light inside. Because you see that? Again, I keep going here, and we're getting these runs that are really narrow, but they're really distracting. So I either want to see more of the body of the liquid and a good gradient on it that's going into clearly what is this highlight in the background, because it would come through. But that's just feeling a little distracting for me, because we get these kind of big runs, but we don't have as many big runs coming down onto the bottle itself. I think this is a really good swing at it. I want to go back. This is a case where this is something I would shoot, and I would go back and I would try it again, because I know I didn't quite nail it. Great concept. Keep pushing it. And Yeager. And I think this is our last one. It is. All right. Pretty food image overall. All right. So a couple things that I'm going to mention about this one. I think that there's a quality of light missing because there's an absence of shadow. So I remember very clearly one of the first photographers I ever worked with. He just simply said, "Without shadow, there's no light." And I think you should kind of take that to heart. If you don't have shadow, you don't have a quality of light. You don't have a real source of light. So quality of light is really important. There are a couple of things I would recommend here. I think that overall, the food styling is really pretty. Let me share some of my thoughts that are just starting to percolate with me. The way this is styled, it's really forward, and it feels like a very full taco, which I like. I like that sense of the very full kind of soft taco with the meat and the sauce, the lettuce. Where it's missing though is it's getting a lot of negative space up here in the backside of the taco, right? So I kind of feel like the line that this piece of lettuce is starting to create needs to be carried back. And this area all back here needs to have additional food. There needs to be more chicken, more lettuce. What's here just needs to kind of come up higher because it's built so far forward, it's starting to feel like it's all falling out. I want it to come forward. I would not want to see it all tucked back in, but I'm seeing a lot of negative space here. The other thing that I would recommend, these two tacos are so close together, but this one is really starting to fall out of focus because it's coming forward just a little bit more. I would actually pull this one forward, and that's going to do a couple of things for you. One, I would again add a little bit more of the food up in here so there's less of the negative space, or have it so that it looks like the taco shell is kind of off center so that it's shorter here. Maybe kind of reverse that. But by bringing this forward, it's going to fill in here a little bit. It's going to go even softer, and it's going to then push our eye into the hero, which I like. I think that pushing our eye into that hero would be a little bit nicer. We've already got this element down here that's kind of pushing us up there. Again, I'm seeing a tangent, right? So we've got this cilantro that's kind of overlapping, but it's dying and stopping right on the same edge of the radish down below, or the cabbage rather. I would have that break much further. So this cilantro comes out and it breaks in here so you don't have that tangent. I want to get rid of that. So overall, pretty nice. I think also the other thing that you could do if you brought this taco on the left forward, it would kind of hide that stand. You're just seeing a little bit of that taco stand here and a hair of it squeaking out. That is easily something that can be cleaned up. This just isn't lending anything to the composition. So by pulling that forward a little bit, you're getting rid of that. You're also filling in this area a little bit. You're throwing this out of focus and you're pushing your eye back there in turn. And the last thing I would recommend is maybe pushing these two elements back up a little bit. So this green is kind of interfering with this green a little bit right here. They're too similar in tone where they're kind of blending, and I want to see a little bit of a break. So having that lime, I'm assuming that's a lime, having that lime go out a little bit, maybe breaking off even more of the composition, that would be helpful. Last tangent that I see is the little bit of tortilla that's coming up here and it's hitting that horizon line. So you don't need it. You know, again, this might be something that we can play with the crop a little bit. I think if the tomato line went out a little bit and you came down ever so slightly so that this horizon line didn't hit right here, you'd be good. Overall, really nice shot. Oh, you know, I'm just realizing too, I think why we're not really seeing any shadow is because these tacos are so high because of that taco stand that they're just not giving us anything grounding there. Not sure what the solution is there, but I want to think about it because I feel like it needs just to be grounded a little bit more. And that's it.
Bro, I'm seeing Dave Schick's image in the folder, but we didn't go over his. Can you see if you have that?
Of course. Where's Dave Schick's image?
Maker's mark on black.
Dave Schick, where? Oh! No, we didn't. How did I skip that? Dave, my apologies. And scrolling up, I must have gone too far or something. All right, Dave. Sorry about that. All right, let's get to your image because I do want to talk about it. There's some good stuff in here and there's some stuff I want to push. So if you remember, I was talking earlier about the image of the scotch or the whiskey that had the smoke coming up. And I felt that there was a pan head up above it that was pushing down and it was lighting the rim It was lighting the surface of the cocktail. It was lighting the bottom puck, and it was giving us some light on the surface. I think this image needs it here, and let me illustrate that for you. So right here, this top rim of the cocktail glass, we're losing. It's totally fading into darkness because there's nothing hitting that top edge, and it's really kind of dark. And the same thing is happening down here. We're really not getting a lot of light on the liquid surface, and as a result, this is all just kind of dying out. So if you use a pan head above and just push a little light down, this is going to kind of highlight a little bit. You're going to get more highlight on the actual surface, and you're also going to get the puck, the bottom of the glass, to also have a little bit of life. I'm noticing that the reflection, it feels like it's holding more light than the actual cocktail itself. So this might be something too where when you have that pan head up above, you can take a gold card and just tip it back and hold it in behind for a capture just to get a little bit more glow, particularly in that ice. And I feel like this would actually match better because right now I'm looking at the reflection and I'm seeing it glow more than the actual cocktail itself. And again, by having that pan head up on top, you're going to get a little bit more light up here. At least you can play with the exposure that's going to have that pop off a little bit more. I think that you've done a pretty good job in getting the wax on the top to highlight. I do feel like this is a little bit strong. That highlight in particular is kind of blowing out, but I love the highlights that are going here on that area where it quote unquote runs. Other things that I'm seeing in the bottle, there's a lot of surface highlight, right, that's coming here. So the light's coming from this left side. We've got a big softbox over here, and it's creating a lot of highlight right here on the actual glass itself. It's lighting the glass and not lighting the liquid. And I know that Maker's Mark is going to want their liquid to light up. That same highlight or that same light source is on the opposite side, lighting the inside, and is creating this really strong sense of light or highlight on the right edge, which is pulling our eye to that right edge. Again, we need to have something that is glowing here. So if we have a pan head or a light up above that's pushing down, you can again use a gold card to kick in back there and kick up and give us some light that's glowing on the inside. This is a brand in particular that's going to want a good amount of glow coming through their bottle so that you can really see the liquid color, and that's something that's missing here. And the other thing that gold card is going to do, it's going to give you the ability to get this mark, this emboss to pop. Again, clients spend so much time and so much money working on the design of their bottles and putting things like an emboss in there, and they want that to highlight, so they're really going to want to see that kind of come to life. So I would suggest using a polarizer on your main light and on your camera so that you can control this kind of surface light, not eliminate it necessarily, but diminish it, and then be able to work with light coming through the bottle, maybe even take that light back around behind the bottle a little bit more so you can get light coming through. The other thing I would recommend is not highlighting the edge as much as you're highlighting the face. I think that the highlight here could be knocked down. That's something that you could do with just a net or a bit of a card to knock this down so that you get more of the shape, more of the light pooling and coming onto the actual brand itself and not being so strong on the little story that's on the side label. That side story is not as important. It is important to the brand, clearly, but it's not as important as really registering and driving home Maker's Mark, driving home the brand itself. Overall, I think that there's some good foundations here. Composition's pretty nice. Again, I think we have a lot of headroom up here. I know we're looking at this on an all black screen, but there's a lot of headroom up here, and I think you could come down just a little bit, even have a little bit more reflection, or have that reflection kind of do a gradient off so it goes a little bit darker, but I don't think we need quite as much headroom. The other thing I might suggest is actually trying a glass that is not as large, because this glass is really big compared to the size of the bottle. It makes it feel like it's a really tiny bottle, which actually it is. It's a 375, so that is a fairly small bottle. So that's probably okay, actually, in that sense. Yeah, so be cognizant of the surface light. Lighting glass can be really difficult when you're hitting the surfaces of it. I like to have a good amount of light coming through a bottle to give that liquid a chance to really kind of be hero. Clearly, there's a bit of faking it and fudging it, and I think that's going to take some experimentation on all of your part just to get a sense of where you feel that you can push that glow coming through a bottle and where you need to back off, because you can definitely go overboard. I do want you to think in terms of classic portraiture. Look at classic portraiture, and again, I'm going to say highlight on one side, falling into shadow. Highlight on the opposite side, shadow behind that highlight. So you're getting the simple light, dark, dark, light. And that gives an immense amount of depth. It's such a simple thing, but it gives so much depth and volume to your bottles, to your cocktails, to your set itself. It's something that I think you should really practice. So anyway, that's it. I think we've covered it all. Matt, is there anything we need to hit before we sign off?
No.
All right. Guys, thank you very much. I hope that you have gotten a good amount of information out of this. I know I went probably an hour longer than I think we intended to, but I never think that's bad. I really try to give you guys as much information as I can. Again, everything I'm saying is just my visual reaction. Take it with a grain of salt. The things I want you to concentrate on are form and volume, whether it's food or beverage or product. Form and volume is absolutely everything, and by using some visual tricks like that opposite and classical portraiture, you can really get a lot more out of it and make things more voluminous. Really concentrate on the composition of your eye. I want you guys to go back and look through all of these images again and make a mental note of where your eye is going. How is it traveling through the actual image? Where does it stop? What does it get stuck on? If it's stuck on something, is it something important or is it something totally ancillary? If it's ancillary, you don't want that to be where the eye goes. So think about light, tangents, how the eye moves through. It's a really important thing. And other than that, I hope you had a great time and enjoyed the information that I gave. Again, go to PRO EDU, check out our subscription page because we've got a really wonderful special going on for just a little bit longer. And it's a great way to check out the totality of our library. And I think we should do this again soon. I actually like doing the portfolio reviews, so maybe we'll put it up again in a few more weeks or a couple months and we'll come back at it. That's it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much.
I discovered photography by accident. I found that the camera was a good tool for me to be creative, to translate kind of my ideas to something real. When I have my printed pieces, people always doubt, is it a painting or is it a photo? I think everybody could get this painterly look. It's really important to look at every little detail, even the details no one will ever notice. The secret is being so dedicated to the thing you want to make. For this tutorial, we created 2 different images. The darker one is a portrait of a girl holding his flamingo. It's a composite. Throws you back in the 18th century golden age feeling. As a contrast to that, we also created a more lighter image. We composited a backdrop from at least 6 or 7 original paintings. We use that as an element in the story. We made a composite of 4 characters played by only 1 girl. We made tiny changes in her hair, in her dress, just to give the girl another character, so it's conceptual. I think it's a good example to show how my process evolves to the final image. I'm not as technical as other photographers. I'm more in creating the image than doing it by a book. So I do hope that with this tutorial I can show you how to make an image that's yours and not an image that's made by rules or made by anything in a fixed way.